What if you could buy a $2.1 million self-storage facility without using a bank, without having to check your credit, without having to get an appraisal, and without having to use your own money? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to share with you in this video that I was able to accomplish. I bought a $2.1 million self-storage facility on 90% financing with some incredible terms. And more importantly, I'm going to show you in this video how you can do the same even if you're just getting started. I prepared a presentation to the Storage Wins community that now I want to give you access to. And it's all about the power of seller financing, how you can buy self-storage facilities without banks, without credits, without having to use your own cash. It's negotiating price and giving the seller their terms, and ultimately what creates win-win deals. So let me start off first by kind of sharing with you in my words, like, what is seller financing? Seller financing, if I was going to simplify it, is basically turning the seller into the bank, right? It's being able to buy an asset. Really, you can apply seller financing to anything. It's buying it without necessarily having to run credit checks and needing W-2s and bank statements and tax returns. It allows you the ability to negotiate terms, right? So many sellers, they are fixed on their price. And one of the things I always ask is, okay, Mr. Seller, well, I'm not sure if I can get you your price, but if I could, would you consider taking payments over time, right? Or if I'm going to give you your price, I'm going to need to negotiate my terms, right? And the terms, I'm going to talk about the four components here, but you have price, you have down payment, you have the interest rate, and then you have the term, the length of the loan. Now, this is really all about creating value. And I think Pace Morby from the Sub2 community is one of the thought leaders and experts, especially when it comes to creative financing. And he does such a great job of putting out a lot of valuable content around creative financing. And he shares his F-150 story. And I want to kind of share with you, as I've heard it from him, years ago, he had an old beat up F-150 and it was kind of getting in the way. It was sitting in the garage. I think it had over 300,000 miles, and his wife wanted him to sell it. Now that truck, if you looked at the Kelley Blue Book value, was only worth $5,000, but Pace, being a deal maker, he wanted 10 grand for the truck. So I believe he listed it on Craigslist, put it out there for double what it was worth. And I don't know how long it sat there, but crickets. Didn't get a call, didn't get an offer, nothing. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Alex, what in the world does F-150 have to do with seller financing? Stick with me because I'm getting there. Well, he went back to the Craigslist, and I think his wife had asked him, like, Pace, aren't you the creative finance dude? And he's like, yeah. She's like, well, why don't you sell the truck on terms? And as he tells it, he's like, that's a great idea. I don't know why I haven't thought of that. And so he just made one small tweak on the Craigslist ad. He said, we'll take payments. We'll take payments. And long story short, he ended up selling that truck for more than he was initially asking. He sold it for $12,500 to some type of gentleman that I guess he used the truck for his business, and the guy was able to generate $7,000 a month using the truck. But I believe the buyer of that truck put $1,000 down and then paid $350 a month for, I want to say, about 5 years, whatever the math ends up being. But basically, he paid more than what Pace was asking. He paid $12,500 for a truck that was only worth $5,000. And one of the interesting points he makes is that real estate works the same exact way. The value comes from what the property enables the buyer to do, right? Oftentimes, I look at a piece of real estate and I'll ask myself, like, what is the highest and best use for that piece of real estate? Whenever I look at storage, sometimes I might look at a storage facility and say, well, based on where it's located, is storage the highest and best use, right? So that's a question you always want to ask yourself. But hopefully that F-150 story that Pace shares helps you understand better what seller financing means, right? It's basically giving the seller their price many times, but you dictate the terms, down payment, interest rate, and the term, right? Or if the seller wants to dictate the terms, then I'm going to get my price, right? Now, why? I think it's important. Why do sellers choose seller financing? Well, number one, oftentimes they can get more money on a piece of real estate if they offer seller financing than what that property might even be worth, right? They get their desired price. Sometimes that's at market value. It could be below market value. In many cases, it's above market value. But as long as you structure the right terms, if you get a low down payment, which I always prefer and aim for, If you get obviously as low an interest rate as possible, even 0% when possible. And believe me, those 0% interest rate deals do exist. They happen all the time. And if you can dictate the term as long as possible, I really don't like to go anything under 3 years. Ideally, I'm looking for 5 to 15 years, but if you can even get longer, the better for you. But there's a lot of benefits to the sellers, and I'm going to walk you through several of the benefits, but one of them is consistent monthly income. And the next slide, I'm going to share with you that facility that I bought. Why was it in the seller's best interest to offer 90% seller financing? In fact, that particular seller makes more passive income today from us paying him every single month like clockwork via ACH than he did when he was operating the storage facility. So there's a lot of benefits. You have steady passive income without the headaches of management, ownership, rate management, taxes, insurance, any maintenance that may come up. You basically get mailbox money without having to run the business. Not only have I bought storage on seller financing, I've actually sold I've sold storage on seller financing. So seller financing can be an extremely powerful tool when you understand the seller's needs, their wants, their desires, and then how to package and structure the deal in a way that it creates a win-win. The big one that you often hear are tax benefits, right? Many times these storage owners have owned and operated these facilities for 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. And their cost basis is so low that if they were to sell the facility, right, and just get a bunch of cash, they're likely going to have a big tax liability. So one of the questions I always ask is, hey, Mr. Seller, in an ideal world, if you sold this and got exactly what you wanted, what kind of plans do you have for the money? Right? Do you want to travel? Are you retiring? Do you want to buy more real estate? And then I'll ask them, I'll say, well, do you have any idea just what the tax implication or your tax liability might be by selling the property and getting a bunch of cash? So what I'm doing is I'm planting little seeds. I'm sharing breadcrumbs that giving the opportunity the seller to pick up and bite and chew on so that now we can open up, have a dialogue and a conversation. And then obviously one of the benefits to the seller is freedom from tenants, repairs, the daily operations. I kind of touched on that. Those are just some of the reasons that it might make sense to a seller. And I think it's your job to really educate that seller. Now, Amelia Personal Storage, this is a storage facility that myself and my partner bought on 90% seller financing. The seller situation, always important that you find out what is the seller situation. Well, they live in Ohio, right? Super smart, just cool guy. He called me from a direct mail letter, and his sister was running and managing the business in Amelia Island, and he lives in Ohio. And they had owned the facility for many, many years, but it wasn't their main focus. They weren't really treating it like a business. Not because they couldn't have, but I just got the sense it wasn't their main business. They weren't really focused on growing and they weren't focused on improving the operational efficiencies of the business. They hadn't raised rates in a number of years. There was no marketing, no website. They really didn't have any technology or automation in place outside of some security cameras. And so because they weren't running it like a business and he wanted to avoid a big tax hit, I asked him that question, the magic words. I said, he was dead set on a particular number, 2.1 million. And I knew 2.1 million was a high price to pay for this asset. So I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you this. I'm not sure if I can get you the 2.1, but if I could, would you consider taking payments over time? And he kind of paused and thought about it for a second. He's like, Alex, I would. What did you have in mind? And boom, now I was in the game. It opened up a whole nother conversation. And so check this out. I was able to negotiate. I got a 3.25 fixed interest rate over a 5-year term. But where this really got interesting was that we amortized it over 35 years, which what that did was that reduced my monthly debt service payment, giving me more cash flow. Typically in storage, you amortize a storage asset over 20, 25 years. Well, I was able to get a 35-year AM, which again, reduced my monthly debt service, increased my cash flow. But where it really got attractive was that I was able to not make any debt service payments for 12 months. So for an entire year, I didn't have any payments to him. That really maximized our cash flow. We had revenue minus expenses, our net operating income was our net cash flow in the deal. So it's been a very, very profitable deal. It cash flows thousands of dollars a month today, and we still have plenty of room for growth and to increase occupancy. And the seller was able to get his price. No broker commissions. He gets mailbox money every single month. And again, he is actually making more money today from us, mailbox, passively, not having to deal with managing and running the business and trying to grow the business, marketing and dealing with customers and auctions and all that kind of stuff that comes with storage. He doesn't have to deal with any of that. And he was able to not have a huge tax liability from selling this asset and just getting a bunch of cash. So here's the promissory note where you can actually see the 3.25 interest rate. You can see he financed 1.9. So we actually had to come into the deal with $200,000, which I got from a private lender and paid a 10% interest rate to. So anyways, phenomenal terms. And guys, those deals are out there, right? You just have to pick up the phone, have the conversation, and ask the question. So here are the 4 core terms, right? You want to consider the purchase price, the down payment, the interest rate, and the loan term. Now, if the seller is going to control the purchase price, if they're going to dictate the purchase price, you need to be able to dictate the remaining 3. Down payment, interest rate, loan term. And by the way, interest rate ideal is 0%, obviously. Now, as you're about to see, I don't pitch 0% interest. I say principal only payments. It's the same exact thing, but it's just a reframe. You ask for principal only payments. And by the way, you can even seller finance the down payment. Like I've had numerous conversations with people that have gotten into deals with no money out of their pocket. The one I shared before was an example of that. 10% private money, 90% seller financing, got into the deal, no money out of my pocket. And every single storage deal I've done has been without having to use my own money. So here are the benefits of seller financing. I'm not gonna hit on every single one because you can read them here. But the big one being defers or mitigates capital gains taxes. Oftentimes the seller can make more, right, than what they could on the open market if they were just gonna sell it outright. Monthly passive mailbox money, which we talked about, no landlord headaches, not having to deal with agents and paying commissions and things of that nature. Oftentimes no appraisals, no inspections, no lender approvals and complicating underwriting departments you have to go through, like what I've done when I've gotten SBA financing. You can close a lot faster. On that deal that I bought on seller financing, once I went through my due diligence period, I think we closed like a week later. Right? So I'm not sitting on the sidelines waiting for the bank's underwriting department or loan closing department to give me the green light. And here's the cool thing is that the seller is safe and secure. They know the asset because they've owned it. So make sure that you educate them on all these benefits. In fact, I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this and make sure that you're equipped so that when you have conversations with storage owners, that you're able to really just drop these breadcrumbs, plant these seeds, and educate the seller as to why they might consider this, because many times they just don't know. Now, what I will say is that the conversation about seller financing with these storage owners, many times I find is a lot easier, simpler than educating a quote unquote motivated seller that owns a home and lives in a home about seller financing. Sometimes you might need to educate a storage owner, but because they're a business owner, they many times, not always, I wouldn't speak in absolutes, but they understand what seller financing is. And then handling some objections, right? Like the language you use is important, right? So try to avoid jargon, right? Like, hey, Mr. Seller, if I could get you your price and I'm not sure I could, right? I'm staying a step behind. Would you consider taking payments over time, right? So that's different than saying, hey, would you do a seller carryback, which they may or may not know what that jargon means, seller carryback. I don't ask for 0% interest. I'll ask for principal only payments. And then make sure that when you're having conversations with sellers, use stories. If you've done creative financing or you've bought deals on terms, make sure to explain those previous seller stories to the seller, because a story sells and a story can help people understand what you're saying. One thing you need to know is that a confused mind is going to say no. So simplify it. Pretend like you're talking to a fifth grader, obviously not in a condescending way, of course not, but explain it in a way that a fifth grader could understand it. And when you approach the conversation and the seller with the mindset of creating a win-win, right? Focus on their priorities, right? Simplicity and speed. Focus on what they want. That's why it's so important to find out what their true motivation is, so that now you can create a structure and a framework that works for them and also works for you. So you really want to position yourself as the helpful buyer who solves problems, not just a negotiator, right? Don't treat this like a negotiation. Treat it like a conversation with a friend. Simplify it. Always communicate in terms of the benefit to them, right? What's in it for them. That is what is most important here in these deals, is understanding how you can speak in terms of why they would consider this. And sometimes it involves educating them. So now that you've seen what's possible with the power of seller financing, and I'm telling you, this isn't theory. I've done this numerous times. I've bought storage facilities. I've bought residential real estate without using banks, credit, and my own cash. So if you got value from this video and you want more strategies to be able to buy your first or your next storage facility, even if you don't have money or have any capital or have any experience, then I want to make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So because every single week I'm dropping new fresh content about self-storage, and specifically how you can buy your first storage facility, and in some cases even your next storage facility. So if that's you, and if you're serious, if you want to surround yourself with a community of like-minded people that are all after buying their first, in some cases their second or even their third storage deal within the next 6 to 12 months, I want to encourage you to click on the link in the description below, storagewins.com, book a discovery call, and I look forward to connecting with you and sharing with you how I can help you find, fund, and profit from self-storage within the next 6 to 12 months, regardless of your situation, regardless if you have capital or experience. I'll connect with you on the next one.